Chapter 33. Eric had been pestering me to take him on a hike. With Olav now spending many hours in the shop, I had some extra spare time, but hiking with Eric was not the gentle song we sang at Thanksgiving. Over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go. Hiking to Eric was more like climbing every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow till you find your dream. Part of the nagging discomfort in my mind about subjecting Eric and myself to such risks, I blamed on my mother-in-law and her Norwegian superstitions. Bad tings come in trees, she would state, which after I replaced the t's with thes, meant that once an accident befell you or a family member, accident number 2 and 3 were bound to happen. Several rules governed her superstition. Mishaps had to be somewhat of the same category and somewhat of the same magnitude. For instance, you couldn't group the sinking of the Titanic with something as minuscule as tipping over in a canoe. I always called her Teary of Trees, an old wives' tale, my answer being, "Dare isn't a turd," but not around the children. However, I can't say I was totally convinced, nor had I always been immune to its influence, even if it was only the bother of having everyone in the family call to remind me that the first and second shoe had already dropped, and to warn me to be careful. Grandma Gustafsson could recite numerous cases in Norway or Sweden, where she had gone years earlier to visit in-laws. She had examples from the lives of her friends, and even closer to home, like Corey and the falling scaffolds. The first accident had been minor, involving a scaffold on one of Corey's jobs falling only a few feet and hitting a parked car. Although it involved property damage, there were no injuries or loss of life. Unfortunately, Ragnar, who had been on the job, embellished the story enough to start his mother counting, "Ja, just you vatch, number 2 is on its way." And so it was. A high wind had come up when the crew was working at another job and was near the top of a tall building. Corey had closed down the job, but in securing the scaffold to the building, somehow one end got loose. 2 men were left dangling on the equipment. People in the office's windows saw it. People on the street below saw it. God saw it too, because he sent a miracle. The fellows were finally able to safely jump onto the roof of the adjacent building. The story was publicized in the newspaper, and the men were interviewed and their pictures taken. The next day they were heralded as heroes, which was good for them, but not for us. Our workman's insurance went up like the high wind. Corey's mother saw the pictures, of course. "Ja, just you wait," she said. I scoffed, but a few weeks later I received a phone call from one of Corey's friends. Did Corey get hurt when the scaffold fell? My heart had begun to pound. The scaffold fell where? When? This morning I just heard about it. The rest of the day I spent in a frenzy awaiting news. I left the house only long enough to pick up Sig and Freya from school. I told Eric for the zillionth time, "No, I can't take you on a hike today." About dark, I saw headlights. I knew it was Corey's truck. I ran out, followed by the kids. I finally got the story. Yeah, the scaffold had fallen 3 stories from the cornice of the Norse Hall building onto a concrete sidewalk. Parked cars had been damaged as well as some of the equipment. I was the color of a cooked crab. Why didn't you call me? "If I told you every time we have a little accident, you'd be in a constant dither," Corey replied. And so, with number 3, Grandma's theory had worked again. But there was one horror story from Norway that seemed to be the exception. So horrible it was that it could never have been duplicated, let alone triplicated. Or who knows, maybe it was. But the details were lost in the catastrophe of war or some such. The Croman of Sorgenfrei. The first awareness of an unknown presence in the town of Trondheim was a series of mysterious echoes from the hills up near the gravel pit. Rumors spread that the sounds were reports from the gun of an old man holed up in an abandoned shack near a large farm called Sorgenfrei, a place free of sorrow, if one could believe the name. The town was mystified. Who was this stranger? What could he be shooting at? Wildcats? Monsters? But those who had seen him said he was shooting crows, the foundation of his diet. In time, the stranger became known as the Croman of Sorrow-Free. On occasion, the neighborhood spotted the old man shuffling down a back alley, muttering strange gibberish to himself. It was reported that he worked occasionally on the farms in the area, but Corey's father never hired him at the Gustafsson farm. The children were glad about that. They feared they might be kidnapped and carried off to the old shack and made to eat crow, feathers and all. He was obviously a foreigner, considerably shorter than the men of Norway. His apparel was worn, his trousers jagged around the bottoms as if hacked off with a blunt knife. His heavy jacket, worn even on the warmest days, was threadbare. Gustafsson's neighbor, a member of the Norwegian army, speculated that the jacket was part of an old German army uniform and wagered that the mystery man was a deserter and that someday German agents might come looking for him. Folks speculated he must be running away from something. Maybe he killed his wife. This was a popular supposition because everyone for miles around could remember when one of their own townsmen had done that very thing, killed his wife, and left her battered body for the neighbors to find. He had disappeared, never to be seen again. Stole away on a ship to Spain or to America, the townspeople ventured. About his features, folks said that if called upon to identify the man, that would be near impossible. His face was hidden behind a screen of gray beard and the brim of a dark hat. Of course, none of the children would ever dare to look into his eyes. It was a well-known fact that an evil man could cast a spell just by staring at an unsuspecting victim. In fact, it was not until after a series of unusual events, the most unusual in the memory of the region, some said, that folks might have been called upon to testify about his features. But by that time, it was known beyond a doubt that the crowman's face would never be seen again. The events began when folks awoke to find a great German troop ship laying in the Trondheim harbor. Rumor was that it had been chased in by English gunboats, an extraordinary feat. Yes, even smaller ships never venture into Trondheim fjord at night. The ship was detained by the Norwegian government. The German sailors, who were allowed occasional liberty, became pedestrians on the streets, frequenting the shops and flirting with the girls. It provided much ammunition for the townsfolk's gossip. In all the hustle and bustle, the crowman was forgotten. But in time, people began to realize that from the first day of the ship's presence, he hadn't been seen. Farms where he had worked reported that he hadn't been around. Folks who lived near the gravel pit said they hadn't heard any shooting. Authorities went to the old shack to investigate. When they returned, their faces were white with horror. Word leaked out about a grisly discovery. A fearful hush fell over the town. Suicide? A murder? No one ever knew for sure. But one thing was certain. No one would ever see the crowman's face again. It had been blown to bits by a shotgun blast in the shack near Sorgenfrei.